Our next speaker is Andreas Schaller. And Andreas wrote, "To be ready for the future, a custom field in S/4HANA has to have a unique name." And Andreas is the head of development from Stellacon GmbH. He was confronted with this topic during an S/4HANA migration project at Springer Nature. Now he's going to present us his experiences and the pitfalls appearing during the project. It's always interesting to hear project reports here. And the title is Unique Names for ABAP Managed Custom Fields in S/4HANA. If you look in the chat, I put an acronym in there for this great title. And it's appropriate for our SAP theme here. So I'll turn it over to you, Andreas. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to be part of the SAP Online track. I want to share my experience made during an S4 migration project for Springer Nature. And so I think we should get very quick into the topic. Springer Nature is a seller of media products, and one well-known media product is there are books. And as every one of us know, each book has a so-called ISBN code. And when we want to sell books, then of course we have also to store those ISBN code into our sales orders. So, and books have ISBN codes, journals have ISSN codes, and there are different types of codes with different number of digits. So at least we need two custom fields, one for the ID code type and one for the ID code. And our target was to had those fields in different entities. We start always when we sell a product with the sales document item, then we forward our custom fields to the billing. And last but not least, we also want to have our custom fields on the delivery item, and so that we can print all those informations on the formulas and so on. So that's the use case, what has to be done. And there is a little bit difference between the old ECC system and the new S4 system. In most cases, when you start appending a field to an entity or to a database table, you always create the append directly to the database. That's not always, but for the classic database table, that was the normal way of life, create the append directly on the database table. But with S4, they have new include structures, and there is no 100% naming conventions, but most of them, the new include structures contains the EEW in the naming. So we decided to use those include structures that has some advantages, or as we see later on, and to find out those structures, you can directly search on the database table if there is a field or a structure with the EEW in the naming, or there's also a transaction SCFD underline registry where all the business contexts are stored, and there's also the persistence include for our custom fields. And what we did, we created a field at the beginning for the VBAP table and for the resulted or for the linked include structure, added our two custom fields. Custom fields always start with CC or YY, and then we did the same for the billing document item, and then we saw we got an activation clash, and we were very confused. Why could this happen? Because on ECC this was no problem, and it was also the recommended way to do so, to have the same field names in different entities, but in S4 it seems not to work. So after some investigations, we find out there's a structure, and this structure contains or includes the item, and also the header includes structures for the sales document and for the billing document. And that's, last but not least, the reason why this doesn't work. And yes, so then we want to be ready for the future, and therefore we created a sub incident in the at support. Oh, sorry. Was there a break in the?
All good. Just your video stopped, but
okay.
The screen sharing is working.
Oh, okay, then that's fine. So then we created an incident at sub support, and we wrote, there's a problem, you made a mistake. And then we got the answer, no guys, that is not a bug, that is a feature. And then they also wrote, in the future there could be more combinations of different include structures for custom fields, and so there is a requirement that custom fields in S/4HANA must have a unique field name. And we were very concerned about this, because we were in the middle of the project. We created a lot of custom fields on different entities, material master we started, and then they came up and say, no, you have to use unique field names. And the next thing was, we thought about how we could prevent further accidents. Yes, wearing a helmet, of course, is not useful in those cases to prevent an accident. And SAP does not also provide proper developer tools. Then we saw, if we would use to have the app custom fields in Logic, it's a Fiori app to create custom fields via app. They always add a suffix. Yes, this would work, but what about legacy fields? And we also did some investigations. Can we avoid to use those EEW includes and do it in the old way, directly appends on the database table? So then, during our investigations about direct appends, we have shown that those new include structures, and it's a different use case, it's for bill of material items. Those include structures are always used in the draft tables. The draft concept is new in S4. It's more or less concerned about Fiori apps, and where you make a call via a data service to the backend, and you are not logged in the whole time to the backend, and therefore you can't create a lock when you maintain the entity, and therefore you have so-called draft database tables where the data are stored before you press the save button, and then they are overhanded from the draft database table to the final database table for the entity. And when we want to use those draft database tables, then it would be an advantage to use those include structures. Otherwise, we have to make the append with the same names multiple times. But that could be done at least for the draft concept. But then we saw all the data service implementation in the back end. There are also those include structures involved. If we don't append our fee to those EEW include structures, we were not able to store data in the draft tables because those lines move correspondings to hand over the data to the structure would not work. And last but not least, after some headache, we saw that it makes not really sense to make direct appends when we want to be ready for the future. Then we have to use those appends. Otherwise, it's a lot of effort. You have a lot to debug, and last but not least, sometimes you would have to make also some modifications due to missing extension points where you can create the data overhanding by yourself. So yes, there seems no way out. We have to use those structures. And when we use those structures, then the field names must be unique. That's at least the result. So then we decided to use it doing in the same way with a suffix. And within the transaction SCFD registry, for each entity, you can see the given suffix by SAP. And that's the easiest way when you have a business context where is already registered in the registry for custom fields, then you are able to use the given suffix. Yes, so that's not a big deal. But then some questions came up. Maybe some of you know in the old world, there were some custom includes too. They always start with CI in the front for custom include, and also for those example where we have the new EEW include for the coding block, and the old custom include is contained or is part of the new structure. And what should we do in this case? Can we use the same suffix as for the parent? Yes, and the answer is yes, you should always use the same suffix as from the parent. And then there are more include structures. For the coding block, there is a include structure for the EDI, for iDocs. And what should we do in this case? Can we use the same suffix or can we not use the same suffix? And the answer was this must be decided on a case-by-case basis. So there is no general rule given from SAP what to do with different structures. And we decided where it's necessary for the data overhanding, then we have to use the same field name. Otherwise, it won't work, and we do so. But the custom fields and logic department from SAP, where we were in contact, they say we are only responsible for the tool custom fields and logic, and for the business use case, there is the responsibility by a different SAP department, and yeah, they have to decide. So, and now we came to the harder use cases. Sometimes there were include structures for different business contexts or business entities which are not registered in the custom fields registry, which is in the transaction SCFD underline registry. And do we need a unique field name in these cases too? And the answer from SAP was, yes, it could be possible that SAP creates a business context within the next release or in the over next release. And if you want to shift your fields from to the new EEW include, then of course the rule also applies that the custom field must be unique. And what would you recommend to do? The answer was, you should use also a suffix starting with Z or Y, but ensure that this suffix is used only once per table or structure. Then you're on the safe side that you don't create custom fields with same names. Yeah, and we had the next question was, yeah, must every custom field have a suffix at least? And for existing legacy fields, it's not, the suffix is not mandatory. The suffix is only to ensure that fields have a unique name. If you have a different approach to get unique field names, then it's also fine if the fields doesn't have suffixes. But SAP has strongly recommended to use a suffix where it's possible for each new created field. And what about the all CI includes? Can we expect that each CI include is part of a new EEW include? And the answer was yes, there is an internal guideline from SAP. If there is an EEW include for the custom fields and logic app, then the old CI include should be part of those. But as we saw, we had to create sometimes support incidents that SAP made a fix to shift the old CI include into the new EEW include. Yes, and then we got really some headaches because when we have a business context, that's the easy case. We take the suffix from SAP. When there is no business context, then we have two cases. One case is we have no further dependencies to overhand structures or something like that. Then we can use a C suffix, a unique C suffix. But when we have overhand structures where the data are shifted from one structure to the next structure, normally SAP expect the same field name as in on the database or from the business entity, but then we can not use a different C suffix for a different structure. And there was the answer, if you are not sure, then you should create an OSS incident. Yeah, and those cases, we decided to make some investigations to see in the debugger what happened. Is the structure included in the database table, and or is there an exit point where we can do the mapping by ourselves? And all those things together, then we decided, okay, in this case, we use the same field name because otherwise the application would be broken. Or if there is the possibility, then we created a unique suffix also for overhand structures. Yeah. Then our mission during the project was we have to do some extra work, because now we must adapt all our existing custom fields and give them unique field names to be ready for the future. Because we cannot be sure if SAP came up with a new structure where they make a combination of the EEVW structures where we have already used, and in the next release or if the next S node, then we could run in trouble if the new structure combines two structures we have already used with the same field name in different structures. Then we have also an activation clash, and that's not very funny. So we have the problem, there is no proper tool to identify and prevent duplicates. So we get out a list of all set fields from the database and from the include structures and identified them. Then we had the problem that if we would make a rename of the field and the field is already on the database and we have some data stored in the database, during the change of the name, the values are gone, and also the change history would be lost. Yes, so we had to make a small landscape transformation to create the new database field first, then shift the data from the old field to the new field, and then adapt all the code and customizing where the field is used. But there we have the problem with the use list. You don't get out dynamic use cases. You don't get out if the field name is stored in some customizing where for field control, in those cases the field is only readable or it's hidden. So sometimes field names are stored in customizing tables. And last but not least, a complete integration test is needed. And we saw that after all those adaptations, and we had from our used list, there still came up some accidents some weeks ago where we have overseen something to change. But the good fortune was we are in the middle of the project. We were not productive, so it would be very, very hard if we have such an accident if we were productive. So this would be really, really this should be a case which should be avoided where it is possible. So during the creation of all those custom fields, we saw that it's not enough to put the new fields into the new EEW structure. There's also one transaction. It's called SCFD underline EUI, where you have to enable those fields. And then for those fields, you need maybe also OData value helps. And you have to, at the moment, you have to manually transform there are 4 value helps to so-called CDS value helps, and it's only one key field, and the field must have always the name code, and you have only a language field in the description, and then you use those value helps for the custom fields. You have only the field content itself in the description. But SAP told us they plans to improve this in one of the next releases. Yes, that is what I have already told. At the moment, you have only the possibility to have one key field, but that's a case where you have plans, and plans or storage locations, where you have storage locations, and the same storage location could be available in different plans. So at the moment, we get out all storage locations, and we cannot see where those storage location belongs to, or if we want to have only the storage locations for a specific plant, that's not possible at the moment for own created customer fields. Yeah, but it's the same. SAP also told us they want to improve this with one of the next releases. The preferred way, or the preferred way from SAP is, instead of creating fields manually, you should use the app custom fields and logic. And if you use so-called association targets, but at the moment there are only a few of them, then you have more key fields, like for the cost center. For the cost center, it's related to controlling area, and there's also a date where it's valid. So there are at least 3 key fields. That's possible if the association target is still in place. But for our example, we have seen before, for the storage location, it's not in place at the moment. But SAP told us they plans to enlarge those lists, and if there is a requirement, then you can also create an S node, and they will come up with a fix with an S node. But this always takes time, yeah? And we all know most of our customers are impatient. They want the solution now, and the business wants to test, and developer wants to develop, and creating an S node is always a burden. Yeah. So, and that's what I have told before. After you added the fields to the new include structures, then you have to go to the transaction SCFD underline EUI, and then you can enable your field. And when you want to have a value help, then you have to decide the semantic type list, and then you have also to fill the field value help view with your created CDS views. And there's also, it's not directly a wizard, it's more or less a template. When you press this button, then a pop-up appears where you can see the CDS view code, which could be taken as template and to create the CDS view in ABAP Eclipse by your own. Yeah. And after you have enabled the fields in the transaction, then you can go to the fields, custom fields and logic, and then you can enable, for example, a business scenario, where you can also enable the field in a data service or in an UI. But if you chose the way enable the field in a business scenario, then you are switching on the data overhanding from the sales document to the billing document. Because of our unique field name, move corresponding from ABAP won't work. So, and therefore SAP provides a so-called data transfer in a business scenario. If you want to let the fields where have different technical field names on the database tables, and you want to shift the value from the sales document to the billing document, then the recommended way is go to the app, identify the business scenario, switch it on, enable it, and then the data transfer is done automatically. Yes, so now it was not enough trouble. We have further troubles. So
short interruption, sorry. Only 3 minutes left to have a proper Q&A session, please.
Okay, then I will hurry up. So we have the problem that sometimes old CEI includes were not part of the new EW include, which means roadworks, and create OSS incidents. And there are sometimes EEW includes which are not registered, also roadworks. And the answer from SAP was, yeah, with the next release, there will be a new structure, and the new structure should be part of the registry and also roadworks. Yeah. And I will skip this. If you're interested in this, then you can read it later on. And now I came to my gift list. What is my wish? There is no official sub-guideline. We start ECC, then 2015, S/4HANA came up, and the first official S-Note appears in March of this year. And there's a second S-Note from October this year, where this topic is officially handled by SAP. But there is no guideline how to let custom fields have to be unique, and no information about potential impact for ECC, because if you make a brownfield approach, do you have to rename all those fields, or which field should be renamed if you have or wants to avoid clashes? What about third-party add-ons? So in my opinion, SAP must come up with an official guideline covering all those topics. They also have to provide, in my opinion, a tool to handle those fields. We started at least with a simple table where we wrote down our database or structure name and the C suffix. So it's not really, high skilled tool in those years. There must be a IT solution and not a manual table. So integrate ATC checks, and we also want to register our own C suffixes, maybe auto completion in Eclipse. It seems there is a lot of work, and that's at least my Christmas wish list. For sure not for this year, maybe for the next year. And what I also want is having a full DDIC support in the app, custom fields and logic, at least at on-premise, so that you can choose your own data element, create foreign key relationships, also make reuse of DDIC value helps. So that's my wish list. And now I came to the letter of thanks. And so then I'm at the end. So, and if there are some questions, feel free to ask.
So Andreas, can we tweet at your Stellacon Twitter handle as well?
Yeah, yes, you can.
Okay, I've got it in the chat here.
Thank you, Andreas. Domi, do you see some questions, or I can ask a first question? So right now, if I have a system and I have to add in an old system and have to add a new field, then I always should use unique field names from now on. Is it correct in a VW for ABAP, for bug, and so on? Is it correct? It's to solve
there is no official statement from SAP, but if I were you, I would really think about this. Yes. So if you want to avoid that you run later on in trouble when you make a brownfield migration, then yes, this should be done.
And what do you think if I have to touch an existing application right now and I have non-unique field names, should I adapt it also before I have to migrate to a S/4HANA system? Make it sense?
I think it could make sense to make a system landscape optimization, which means change field names, make copy of the database values, considering also the value, the change history, and so on. But that's a big task. And in my opinion, SAP should provide a tool by itself. But if you do it now, there is no tool available. So there will be a DSAG workshop in November together with the responsible persons from SAP, where we want to discuss those topics. I'm not 100% sure if everyone of SAP is aware about the impact for legacy systems. So in my opinion, they're not really concerned about this. I was really concerned about this, and we were lucky because our migration project was more or less a greenfield approach, and we are creating the fields new in a greenfield, but we are shifting existing code manually from A to B to get rid of legacy code, and because the old system is really in place since more than 20 years, and so there's a lot of old stuff in the system, so we decided to make it from scratch. But if a different customer came with a brownfield approach, and of course for the sales document and billing and delivery document, all the systems I know, their fields have the same names. And it's not only one field, it's more or less sometimes a bundle of fields.
Okay,
what we was really concerned about, this was my first S4 project, and I was why there are no further customers run in this trouble. We are the first ones. That was my first question. But I think a lot of customers will make a brownfield approach. They make direct appends. They don't use the EEW includes. Maybe they don't use Fiori applications. They use the old GUI application. And if you completely stick on the old world, don't use the data, Fiori, and all those stuff, then it's not a problem. The old stuff is working fine. But if you want to be open for the new world, then you have to shift your fields to the new includes to have it in place in your data service. And then you run in trouble. And maybe there are some systems running in productive use case, and then business came up, we want to use those no Fiori application, and then the developer wants to shift the field to the EEW include, and then crash. So, and that's for me, it's not it's a big impact.